Hi everyone, this is Sally Fowler with Disabled Advantage. Thank you for joining me on my Patreon tier, Service Dog Questions Answered. In this post, I'll be answering question number 7, should I own or train a service dog or find a program? And the answer to this question is specifically geared towards people living in the United States because people in other countries have to go through a specific process for obtaining a service dog. And that is a process I am less familiar with as I am located in the States. The first thing you want to ask yourself when you're trying to determine if you should own or train a service dog or find a program is what the level of help is that you're looking for. There are a few different options available to you. The first is to train your own service dog by yourself using materials that are readily available to you, such as books or online training videos. The next is to train your service dog with guidance. That's where a professional service dog trainer is going to give you a structured lesson plan to follow and report back to and have various check-ins and evaluations to monitor your progress and to give you constant guidance throughout the entire process. That process may also include helping you to find a dog to start with or evaluating a current dog as well. The third option is board and train. There are various private trainers who offer services where they will board your dog at their facility for a set amount of time to teach them specific skills. And you may need to do this several times with this trainer so that your dog gets various tiers of obedience training as well as task training. Or it might be that you're able to do the obedience training and this trainer does just the task training. But you would be separated from your dog for a few weeks to a few months while they undergo that training, and then the trainer would teach you how to work with your dog. The fourth option is working with a program who trains the dog for you, and most programs will, it does vary. Some programs have their own breeding program and puppy raising program, and those dogs then undergo training done by them or volunteers that work with the program. Other programs find shelter dogs to train to be service dogs, and other programs yet are willing to give you guidance for owner training. So it gets a little confusing. There's a few different ways to go about this. But in general, if you're doing the training, whether by yourself or with the guidance of someone, that counts as owner training. And if you're working with a service dog program for the purpose of this post, that means that the program is the one finding or raising a dog and then matching you with a dog that they have trained themselves. I have created a flowchart to illustrate various considerations for this particular question, and I'm attaching that along with this post. It's free. I encourage you to print it out, save it for yourself. I do ask that you don't resale it or try to claim it as your own, but it is a helpful tool for walking you through a few of the considerations and questions to ask yourself for making this particular decision. But I'm also going to talk through some of the most important questions and considerations to ask yourself to help determine what the best path is for you, because what's good for you may not be good for someone else. So it's important to look at a lot of different details before you make this decision. The first question I would encourage you to ask yourself is, have I trained a dog before? And I ask this because if you've never trained a dog before, this is going to be very, very hard. It's like if you've never taken up running as a hobby before, but you want to enter an Olympic race as a runner. You could probably do it, but it would be really, really hard and you would probably fail a lot. And that's not to discourage anyone, but it is to illustrate the level of difficulty that training a service dog is. It's not the same as training a pet dog. And so, especially if you've never trained a dog before, going at this alone is something that should make you take pause. Now, it's not to say that you shouldn't owner train, but you should definitely consider finding a private trainer who can guide you throughout the entire process. Have you trained a working dog before, or have you trained a stubborn breed or dog before? And that's sort of two questions, but they're both questions that I think a lot of people don't think of. If you've trained a working dog before, you're going to be more familiar, even if you haven't trained a service dog, you're going to be more familiar with being able to work with and communicate with a dog who's high energy, extremely driven, needs that job to do because otherwise they go a little bit off the rails. And it's going to prepare you better, and you'll be able to adapt your approach a little bit more fluidly for working with a service dog and changing what you've learned. And I bring up the stubborn breed because there are a lot of working dogs who are not stubborn breeds. However, if you know that you need a dog for heavy mobility assistance, which is brace work, pulling weights behind themselves, or stabilization where you're leaning on the dog lightly, you are going to need a large dog, and typically large dogs who are suitable for mobility work like that are not happy-go-lucky, friendly, eager to please retrievers. They're a lot more stubborn, set in their ways, strong-willed breeds. And if you've never worked with a breed like that before, it can be an incredible challenge to figure out how to get on the same page with that dog, how to convince them that what you're trying to accomplish is worth their time. And they can make amazing service dogs. And I'm speaking from personal experience. My first dog, Robbie, was extremely stubborn, and Austin is also extremely stubborn and a different flavor of stubborn. It's a delight some days, and other days it's really stressful. And it was a really sharp learning curve for me training Robbie. I had trained a dog before, I had trained horses before, and that definitely gave me a leg up. But a lot of the approaches and techniques that were discussed in most service dog information were written for dogs that just want to be your best friend and just want to do all of the things for you as happily as possible. And that was not Robbie's approach to life. He was an amazing working dog and he was really dedicated, but if he didn't see the point in doing something, it was really hard to convince him that it was worth his time to do it. And there were also days in the beginning where he challenged me, and it is not a path that I would recommend for somebody who's never trained a dog before or somebody who has never worked with a stubborn breed or a working dog mentality before. So if you haven't trained a dog before, definitely seek the guidance of a professional trainer or consider a program. If you have trained a dog before, but you've never trained a working dog or a working breed before, I would recommend you find a professional trainer who's experienced, or go through a program. But the caveat there is that if you need a really big dog for service dog assistance, you may not be able to find a service dog program who utilizes that particular breed, and you may have to go the path of owner training. And in that case, definitely find a trainer to help you. Are you able to be active each day and take basic care of yourself? This is difficult because this goes back to, I've mentioned in previous posts, you have to be disabled enough to need a service dog, but healthy enough to take care of the service dog. And this goes back to that concept. When you're owner training a dog, you are putting a lot of time and energy into your dog. There are no days off, not really. There might be days off from training, but there are not days off from taking care of your dog and fulfilling their needs. So if your disability is progressed to the point or is severe enough to the point where you have a person coming in every day helping you get dressed, helping you get out of bed, helping you go to every room, helping you with every thing throughout the day, you may need to go through a program, or you may need to consider that a service dog isn't a good option for you, period. Working with a service dog, even if somebody else trains the dog for you, you still need to be able to communicate with your dog and take care of them, or have someone in your life who's able to help you with those things. Yes, eventually that dog is going to help you with day-to-day activities and improve your functionality and improve your quality of life. And keeping all of that in mind, you also have to be able to help them get there. And they can't get there if they never get the chance to learn with you on a day-to-day basis and have you push through hard disability days to make sure they get exercise, to make sure they get all their training, to do public access, to go places, to do things, to be around various stimulation and things like that. And along with that, can your particular condition withstand active training? Active training, service dogs undergo both passive training and active training. Passive training is where they're practicing being in place or being in down while you have lunch, things like that. And active training are most of what you see. It's going to public access to do training and specific exercises. It's doing their socialization training, going to obedience, going to places that you can practice obedience training and challenge your dog, and putting your dog in situations around stimulation that will teach them to be calm and confident around stimuli that you personally find abrasive to your disability, or things that you typically don't like, or things you typically stay away from, but you have to make sure that your dog is trained around it so that they can function around it, so that they can help you function around it. And specific examples are firework displays, being in crowds, going to movie theaters, going out on really hot days or really cold days with moderation, and things like that. And those are situations that if you personally struggle with them, but you know you're going to be around them, and you never teach your dog how to be confident and how to work in those situations, they're not going to be able to be a reliable service dog for you. And so that is where having a program train your dog, a program who can take your dog to Disney World and do training exercises and make sure that your dog is fine with weird people in large mascot costumes coming up and petting them, then you need to go with a program over trying to train the dog yourself. Do you have a person who can help you with rough times? If you do not have anybody in your life who can help you, I recommend you go through a program. And that sounds harsh. The reason for it is owner training a service dog is not a one-man job or a one-woman job. You're going to need to have people who can help, possibly help with training exercises to get your dog ready for seeing people handling you, take you places if you're unable to drive, and being on the lookout for off-leash dogs or unruly dogs who might be approaching your team when you're focused on doing a training session. And a big one is that if you're likely to need hospital care or have procedures done, recover from an accident, you need someone who can come in and is familiar with your dog, is trained in communicating with your dog and handling them in the way that you want them to be handled to maintain consistency for their service dog training, who can take them for walks and play with them and do simple training exercises and things that keep their mind sharp when you're laid up in bed or you're in the hospital. And if you don't have a person like that in your life, you can suffer really detrimental setbacks in your service dog's training, where it takes your service dog 5 years to be trained as opposed to 1 or 2 years. And it may seem like, oh, I got this. I've been on my own forever. I can totally do this. This is fine. And that may be the case. But it is something that I encourage you to consider. And before you get a service dog, before you partner with a service dog, think it through. Who will help out? Are there dog walking services near you? Will they listen to you? Are there mobile groomers? Things like that. Are you willing to spend 30 to 60 hours on your dog's training each week? I got told once that it was unrealistic to expect people to spend 30 hours a week on their dog. And it sounds excessive, but when you do the math, as I have, 30 hours a week is fairly reasonable. For pet dog owners, one of my clients ended up doing about 25 to 30 hours a week with her dog. She did, I think, 3 hours a day, 2 or 3 hours a day every day. And then on the weekends, she worked in more active training hours. But when you think about how many hours in a day you could work with your dog and how many days there are in a week, it actually adds up pretty quickly. And that's even without doing hour-long training sessions. That's based on doing 5-minute training sessions, but throughout the day or at strategic points in the day, and layering your training sessions effectively. If you don't have bare minimum of 30 hours a week where you could see yourself working with your dog, fitting them into your routine, making special time to take them to town to do socialization and public access and proofing their obedience and their task training, then you should seriously consider going through a program or doing board and train with a private trainer. Do you work? If you work a job, you can still owner train your dog, but it's going to be more stressful. And you're going to have to be more creative about where you fit in your dog's training and how, and you will run yourself ragged in the first year. And that first year is going to be hard for anybody, regardless of your working status. The first year it's the hardest. You're adapting to a new routine and a new lifestyle and new habits, and you're learning new information, and your dog is learning a bunch of new things as well. It's hard for everybody. And if you have a job or you also have other responsibilities like children, you need to be really strategic in how you map out your day-to-day routines and schedules to make sure that everybody's being taken care of. And training a service dog is not a hobby that you can pick up and put down on the weekends. My client, who was able to mostly work with her dog on the weekends, is training a therapy dog, which is different from a service dog. And she wasn't needing to put in the same level of intensity and training as rigorously as a service dog does. And I have a job. I have this job. And I was training a service dog. And it's very hard. There were plenty of days, and there continue to be plenty of days where my balance is off, where, well, that was a really heavy disabled advantage day. Or, well, this day I got a lot of housework done and I got a lot of Austin training done, but I did not get very much done for disabled advantage. And I can do that because I'm my own boss and it's my own business and have full control over being able to work and manage CRPS. This is the only job I can do because I have complete control over it. And if you don't run your own business, you don't have that much control over it. And so it will probably eat into your dog's training a lot more than you think it will. And you will get to a point where you can take your dog with you for training, but initially you won't be at that point because they won't have the necessary skills to be able to mentally handle being in your workplace. Not to mention, you'll need to get a reasonable accommodation from your employer, and that may take time. What's your budget like? If you are worried about money, you may think that you can't afford a program. A lot of programs are free depending on your demographic or your need. Some offer fundraising and others are very affordable. Not all programs are $20,000 right out the gate. Most private trainers are several $1,000s. And the reason for that is they're putting a lot of time and energy into your dog and they're private. So they need to make it count for each client. If you find a trainer who only charges $500 or less for training a service dog, I do not recommend going further with that unless the exception would be if they are doing it purely as a hobby and they do indeed have years of experience training service dogs. Otherwise, I would be very suspect of a trainer not charging very much money for training a service dog. And the reason for that is just that service dog training is very rigorous. It's very multi-layered of skills and qualities and exercises that go into making a good service dog a good service dog. And it's not something that can be really banged out in a few weeks or something that should be cheap. It should not be incredibly cheap. It definitely should not be the same price as pet store training or cheaper than pet store training, unless you're going through a reputable program who works with you on the price or does free service dogs. So that's the exception to that rule. But if you're looking at a private trainer and they're not doing very high prices, I would ask them why their prices are so low. And if they say, well, I really just want to help people and I've been training service dogs for like 30 years, here's the evidence, you're just going to have to go with what your gut is telling you. But I would ask questions if it's really, really cheap. Where do you live is another consideration. Like I said at the beginning, if you live in a country other than the US, there are different processes that you have to go through. And even within the US, do you live in a city or do you live in a rural area? If you live in a rural area, likely the resources available to you are going to be more sparse. And even if you do live in a big city, but you live in a state like North Dakota, where everything is really spread out, you might have resources of a big city, but you don't have very many service dog resources to rely on. So if that's the case, you may need to find a program that works with a lot of different states. In the US, you may not be able to find a private trainer. Finally, do you have social anxiety or sensory overload problems? And these might be related to your disability or they might be compounding alongside your disability. If these are factors in your life, I would strongly encourage you to reconsider owner training. When you're training a service dog, part of the training for public access, like I said before, includes exposing your dogs to things that you personally have a really hard time with to make sure that they are able to function in it to help you function. And the other side of that is that you do need to be willing to interact with the general public. There are plenty of times where I've needed to ask strangers to walk past my dog a certain way or approach and pet without permission to help prepare my dog for that sort of thing happening, or practice walking up to someone and asking for help finding a particular part of the store so that my dog can work on staying at my side quietly and not trying to interact with anybody else. And public access issues are a thing you need to be aware of. They don't happen very often, but they do seem to be more of a problem in places where people are not expecting a dog to be there, or in places where people trying to fake service dogs or ESAs is a rampant problem. You're more likely to have an access issue. And if you have social anxiety or you have sensory overload, dealing with those types of situations are going to be immensely stressful for you and overwhelming, and you can't avoid them because your dog needs them, but it puts you in a very weird, difficult position, and I do not want that for you. I want you to be able to train your dog confidently and feel like you can handle things when you go out in public. And I feel like it's kind of a disservice. Nobody really talks about all of the things that go into service dog training. And so people who have anxiety don't realize that you're going to have to push your threshold for your anxiety a lot of times when you're training a service dog yourself. And that is something where if somebody else is training the dog for you, you are being spared from that particular situation. You get to come in once the dog is fully trained. And if that type of situation happens to you where somebody's questioning your right to be accompanied by your service dog, the dog already knows how to handle that type of situation and can do pressure therapy on your lap or your feet. They can guide you to an exit. They can lean against you. They can stabilize you, whatever you need to get through that situation and move on with your day. But if you are training the dog yourself, you have to be having trouble with that situation, but also remain mentally present so that you can teach your dog how to respond and interact with you in that situation. And it's very, very hard. And I do have occasionally I have sensory overload as part of the CRPS if my pain gets really high or I'm really tired or a specific frequency of noise hits me. I do get disoriented. I get dizzy. I start to black out. Sometimes I just fall down outright. And I train with another person. I train with my husband or I train with my best friend. And they're both experienced and equipped to be able to handle Austin in that moment. And so if for whatever reason I'm suddenly incapacitated, they're able to pick up the leash and direct him on how he needs to respond to that situation, and he learns over time. Additionally, if I know that I need to train him around a stimuli that I find stressful, like going in crowds, we pick a good day and I just get through it with my focus being completely on him and less about myself. And I'm able to compartmentalize it like that, but not everybody is. That's my ability. It's my disability. And it's the skill set that I have, but it's not something that I would expect every handler to possess. So it's definitely a consideration for you if you have sensory issues or social anxiety. There may be many more considerations to think about, but these are the ones that I feel are the most pressing for people to think through, talk through with somebody in their life, If you need help determining what is the best path for you based on your unique situation, I encourage you to book a coaching session with me to talk about your situation and figure out what's the best option and what's the healthiest option for you. Coaching sessions are 2 hours long for $100, or you can make a package of coaching sessions so we can talk throughout several different sessions to help you determine what is the best path for you and helping you find that best path, whether it's working with me or finding you a good program who can help you. And finally, one point on programs I'd like you to be aware of is that if you need bracing assistance, a lot of programs, a lot of service dog programs do not teach bracing. And the reason for that is a lot of them are simply using dogs that are too short. Goldens and Labradors are not the right size for an average adult to be used for brace work. The follow-up to that is that I have talked to service dog trainers about this, and it seems to be split. Some believe that there's no safe way to do it, which is not accurate. Some believe the dogs hate it, which is not accurate. I do fully believe there are some dogs who cannot stand wearing counterbalance harnesses, but it's not every dog. And so it's not quite right to just blanket all dogs hate it. But it is difficult to teach, and it's takes a lot of care and consideration for making sure that the handler is bracing correctly and only applying some weight to the dog and not their full body weight. If you need to bear your full body weight on something, working with a dog is not a good fit for you. You need to be using crutches or a walker. And so I believe a lot of them don't teach brace work because it's just safer to not even go down that task path. So if you do know that you definitely need help standing up or preventing falls, you may need to look into owner training and working with a private service dog trainer if that's a task that you definitely know that you need assistance with. If you have any questions following up on this question, please don't hesitate to send me a message, send me an email, or leave a comment on this post. Thank you for listening.